This is a story about the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we live out in the world, and the space between those two. It's about how we love, how we lose, and how we recover, or not, through the stories we make up in our heads. I'm Robin Rice, and this is also my story. Preface to Chapter 26. 100 Ways to Sunday was written before I was more fully educated on what cultural appropriation meant and why that can be harmful. While the story spans traditions and cultures from Hawaii to Africa to China, creating the setting in the Native American lands of Canyon de Chelly was something I would not have done had I realized my error at the time. I offer my public apology here, now, and am glad for the opportunity to do so. Chapter 26, of Mantles and Initiations. Storytellers play God with their stories. They bless and they curse. They create and destroy. They let people die or live, maybe healthy, maybe maimed. It's all up to the story's author. There are a few safeguards. First, the storyteller knows the receiver can always choose to put the story down. I can't tell you how many times I've stopped a story, book or movie, halfway through because I didn't want to be left with what was obviously going to come next. I am self-protective that way and glad for the right to be so. And if by chance I miss the opportunity to be surprised, I'm okay with that. The second safeguard is kind of karmic, in that what you write can and will boomerang back to you. So much so, these days when I mentor a writer, I always ask point blank, have you lived what you're going to put out there? Because if you haven't, you will. And so we quasi-demigods must choose, will it be a blessing or a curse? A blessing is a gift, an offering. Technically, it's supposed to be about some god blessing you, but anyone can bless anyone else directly. Kind of like Santa's elves showing up to do the job in the same spirit as Santa himself. A blessing is different from grace because grace is mysterious, and a blessing, at least a direct one, always has a point of origin, a blesser to author the blessing. Here, have one right now. Imagine me extending a blessing of beauty and hope to you. It's yours, really. Bless you. To bless another, I believe we must first know that we are blessed. Also, sincerity is required. That should be obvious, I think. And a blessing must be freely given, no strings, no caveats, no IOUs. As a blesser, you also have to know the power of a curse, which can be anything between a statement of "you're so stupid" after a mistake to a dark shaman putting a poisoned bone in something of your likeness, right through your heart. To know a curse is to know what it is like to have your story pulled out of free will and get stuck under a Linus cloud, or worse. To bless even when you have been cursed. Now, that's a blessing with some power. And blessings do have varying degrees of power. Holy water from St. Bridget's Well or the Vatican? A candle lit at Mother Mary's last known house in Turkey, or where 3 little children, and eventually a whole town, saw Our Lady of Fatima appear in an open field? Those have a lot more weight behind them than, say, someone casually lighting a candle from IKEA they bought at 12 for $3. We also have degrees of power in our blessings. How much heart is in it? How heavy a weight has that heart carried and still lived to bless others? This is the true essence of gravitas. Because I've always wanted to be a blessing to others, even if I have failed miserably at times, and I have, I could only imagine being the kind of writer that blessed. I do not say this with a blush or a false sense of humility, nor any savior complex. It just is, like my brown hair and blue eyes, 5'4" stature, and sense of humor. I mean, if you're going to go to the trouble of writing all these words, they might as well do some good. In the tiny world in which I am a creator god, this world of stories about stories or any of my books, if you stick with me, you shall be blessed. And if you go, bless you for that too. See how I did that? But even the well-intentioned blessers are going to have to face up to both the light and the dark, because that's the nature of our world. The curse tests the blessing, and the resulting blessing proves the limits of the curse. In other words, a story of blessing first initiates the blesser, making sure it's not just fluff and giggle. When it came to my first published novel, 100 Ways to Sunday, I was asking for it. Really, really asking for it, as it turns out. Enter the labyrinth. After 2 years awake, having read at least 200 books, meeting countless seers and healers, and having taken a handful of workshops and educational travel trips, on one average everyday afternoon, I laid down to take a shamanic journey and came back with a story. For a book. A novel, to be exact. It was just the bare bones outline of what would happen and to whom and why, but I instantly knew the story was a calling. I guess I'm writing fiction next, I remember saying to myself. By this time, I'd published one major nonfiction book, written one full-length screenplay, and penned 3 genre-length novels. The first novel, about Andrew, and written in my mid-20s, was so bad my friends didn't know how to tell me. They just avoided me. All 10 of the people I sent the book to, crickets. And no one willing to return my follow-up phone calls. When they finally did get back to me, I saw only pitiful looks on their faces. There was nothing to critique. It was just bad. The movie was written in the same time frame, and it was good, I thought, but so did people in the film industry. Sort of a take on Cocoon, with old people trying to get their mojo back. It was called Not If You Can Help It, and the moral of the story was to go out and spend the life left in you. It got greenlit at a few benchmarks, but I was still in and out of my depressive phases, and at some point, I realized it wasn't a real calling for me. I took defeat a little too quickly, maybe because of the first novel. Anyway, I quit putting it out there. I honestly doubted I would ever write again. But then, one day, I had a thought. How would I know how to write a book if 1, no one had taught me, and 2, I seldom read books? Seemed obvious, in retrospect, that my talent alone didn't make people jump up and, oh my God, want my work. What I needed was a better education. That was a calling. That I could do something about. I started studying the most basic, most helpful, most clear-as-day series of books on writing that I could find. The Reader's Digest series on how to write fiction. 1 book per topic, plot, character development, style, plus 5 or 6 others. I figured if I could write compelling fiction, I could definitely write even better nonfiction, and that was my intent. Besides, the digest didn't have a nonfiction series, at least not one I could find. I also got a writing mentor. She's the one I told you about who wrote romances, and so the next 2 manuscripts, I learned that's what you called a book before it was a book, were romantic novels. As I have said, you will never read either of them. Practice is meant to be just that. You have been spared, and hopefully, my writing reputation as well. Yet even with all of this work, 65,000 words for each manuscript, I never thought I was going to write fiction as a career. Life had other plans. First, the Irish book had come to me, now this one. I asked my guides if they meant now. I think they thought I was being dense. You came here to be a writer. So? So I wrote. For 2 years, a book so multi-layered, so complex, with such a mishmash of ideas and spiritual traditions, but also ordinary life, pretty much like what I'd been living. It was just crazy difficult. While the plot of 100 Ways to Sunday, the working title was In the Lion's Mouth, was not about me. Of course it was about me. Only the plot was a fiction. I would later learn this is true for any writer. What else are we going to write but what's inside of us? It might not come from our dominant personality, but even that bleeds through, I promise you. And so I wrote, and wrote, and wrote. I daydreamed of only this one story. It overtook me, enveloped me. I couldn't really explain what I had in my mind, so for the most part I kept it to myself. But I fell in love with the characters. To this day, I love each and every one. Mary Margaret, Chief, Puck. I had lovers and friends in my life, but these characters, they were family. It's a novelist's thing, hard to explain. I went to bed with them, I woke up with them, we dreamed together. It really was like that. Not me dreaming of them, but them being dreamed into being. Even so, the story had to float in real life too, or what good was it? A novel about my awakening experience might be interesting, but without a dark contrast to the light, it wouldn't remain interesting for very long. You float in a state of perpetual bliss, sure, but what does that have to do with real life here on Earth? The job you have to go back to on Monday morning? Not much. Which means, like it or not, every story needs darkness. Pain, sorrow, shadow, loss. But hadn't I had enough of that? Did I have to give my reader conflict after conflict in order to get the payoff? Was that the only way story could work? It was. So I became determined to make the payoff big. Worth it. My guides were on board. I'd bring them my big and they'd say, make it bigger. Bigger? Yes, everything. More archetypal, more impossible, more beautiful, but also more ugly, more important. Let the universe hinge on what happens in the story. I was uncertain, but they pointed to my own life. Hadn't it become massively crazy already? Hadn't it had dark and light? Could not argue. And so, when I wrote the character of Hannah, her name wasn't Hannah, it was Nell. I changed it at the very last minute, a search and replace. Don't worry, I won't spoil the story for you with too many details if you haven't read it. I didn't know if the story needed a brilliant white light of a human being, but I needed one. When she appeared on the page, I knew who she was. I also knew I needed to tell a story of beauty and innocence and how that can get ripped away by darkness, but then also redeemed. In other words, Nell's story. How the most light of qualities can survive even if we don't. I knew I wanted to bless everyone with the Nell that I had known, to allow them to see the way I saw her as a child. I wanted everyone to know her, and what I lost, and how beautiful it was when she returned. And so I wrote her. Playing God, I wrote her. In what would turn out to be some of the last years in which Nell's mom, Mrs. Bowders, was coherent, she read 100 Ways to Sunday. She knew Hannah was Nell. She knew Hannah's light, and my love. On the other hand, I didn't realize I was writing out one of my deepest needs through the character of Wyanetta Morningstar, the wise woman mother figure I never had, the one who, grumpy or not, would point the way towards something real for my heroine. And then Chief, the teacher I needed but could not find. I wrote him so he could teach me. He understood magic, and pain, and love. He knew that we don't change the world, that when we change, it's because we have changed worlds. He showed up despite Mary Margaret's anger, bitterness, and vile. He took it on for her, the way love does, and the way no one had for me. But that was all fiction. The light wasn't only showing up there, it was showing up in my real life, my very real life. As I was researching the mythological history of Hawaii for one small but potent scene in the book, I thought, why not go? Take the kids. A family holiday. Sounded great. It was my first trip as a solo mom traveling a great distance, and after nearly missing our flights, losing a backpack, and bleary-eyed finding a hidden accommodation in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere, I was rethinking my plans. But we had made a few appointments with some spiritual types on the Big Island, and we were there. We'd find our way. My most essential appointment was with a man billed as a seer and a teacher of ancient Hawaiian wisdom. He was great with the kids, offered a tour of the volcano of the goddess Pele, and somewhere in the midst of that said I ought to meet Miriam Baker. I was game, but who was Miriam Baker, and why should I meet her? He said that she was a master Essene and had been a member of a mystical branch of the Jewish Essenes for 50 years. She wrote a book called Our Angels and Our Mysteries, and, apparently, Miriam performed miracles. As for the why, he said he didn't know exactly, he just thought I should meet her. The elderly, plump woman who greeted us at the door of a small house in a simple neighborhood seemed kind but tired. Wearing a worn-out frock and bedroom slippers, she welcomed us in and said the kids could play in the backyard while we talked, which they loved. Over lemonade, she asked more and more about my story and shared a little of her own. She understood all that had been happening to me and apparently why. As my tales went on, her eyes became brighter. There was an energy to her at the end that was not there at the beginning. As I was about to leave, she turned to my tour guide and said, "This is her." He smiled, though it seemed he was no more sure of what she meant than I was. I waited for an explanation. "Can you come back tomorrow?" she asked both of us. "Yes," we agreed, "but why?" "I have been looking for you, Robin, searching everywhere. I have been looking for the person to give my mantle to before I die, which will be soon." I didn't know what to say, and it didn't feel right to ask questions. I didn't know what a mantle was, or if it were big, like a fireplace mantle, how I might get it home. Hard to believe I was that ignorant, but again, my education. The honor seemed so great I could only say yes. When we returned, a different woman met us at the door. Miriam was in a bright red Hawaiian floral dress, red lipstick, poorly applied rouge, and heels. Her transformation was adorable. Clearly, this day was important to her. The kids were again left to play in the backyard. A ritual began with candles, flowers, incense, and sacred objects I could not identify. She called upon the angels in the utmost of sincerity and spoke words I didn't understand. I was quiet, wondering what a mantle looked like and when she would bring it out. And then the ceremony was done, with no thing presented. I finally asked meekly, "What is this mantle you have given me?" Miriam explained, "It is the result of more than 50 years of my work. It is the merit and power I have garnered through that work. Spiritual merit. Now, I pass it on to you. My lifetime of merit is yours." Chills ran up and down my spine. A lifetime of merit? From a miracle worker? Passed on to me? I had no idea what to say. I mean, what would anyone say? We hugged, and 2 weeks later, she died. Whatever it was, and however it came, her mantle was on my shoulders now. I had so much to live up to. Mysteries indeed. Why she chose me, I had no idea. I still have no idea. But it was in keeping with everything else in my life, so I tucked it away in a file called "Boy, a Lot is Expected of Me." I did a little research. A mantle is released upon someone and used to protect and empower. It's considered a spiritual garment of authority, a grace. The mantle of power is an emblem of God's presence. It envelopes you, covers you, and rests upon you, like a tree in a mantle of snow. A person's life work, a spiritual garment, an act of generosity, and a grace from a God I didn't believe in? Power that envelopes and covers? I'd take it. Of course I would. I just didn't know what to do with it. That, however, was not how my next family vacation would go. By the time of the next one, 100 Ways to Sunday was 90% complete. Dark Crow, the bad guy, was written, his lines of speech laid down, his breath and mood and story set firmly on the page. Purely fictional, I promise. Yes, he was haunted by the things I was haunted by. Yes, he knew an abject aloneness in this world, and the anger that came with it. So, sure, in that way, he was a part of me. But mostly, he was other, someone else, someone I created and so could destroy. Except he wasn't. With the kids in tow again, I set off to get another feel for the essence of the desert Southwest where the book takes place. Arizona, the red rocks of Sedona, then off to the Navajo Reservation and Canyon de Chelly. I'd been before when I first started writing, but I felt I needed to feel the sand and grit on my clothes again, to feel the desert air, to describe the way the sun set in deep colors. We arrived in Phoenix, drove to Sedona, and dove into all the normal kid vacation things. Swimming in the pool, signing up for the specialty day camps, getting groceries for the tiny fridge in the hotel room to cut down on expenses. There was one bedroom and a living room with a fold-out for the kids. They were watching TV in the living room, while Mama took a much-needed post-travel nap. There was just one problem. One big problem. Mama had left her body while sleeping, and she couldn't get back in. I'd heard of things like out-of-body experiences and bilocating, but even if it was more than a myth, I didn't ever expect it to happen to me. Yet there I was, floating above my body, free to fly into the next room where the kids were, free to fly anywhere. It was pretty amazing. Robin, below me, was sleeping, but I was not asleep. What strange aspect of shamanism is this, I thought. I had no idea why I'd left or how, but it was pretty cool. At least, until I could not get back in. The door or window or whatever it was that allowed me to leave had shut. And then a darkness, like a shadow, came over me. And I wanted only to get back into my body. It would not let me. It, whatever it was, had intent to harm me. I could feel it like a strangling, a suffocating. Where were my 40 to 50 guides now, I thought? Nowhere near. I was trapped in this darkness. I thought, I'll be carted out of here. My kids will go to live with their father full time. I'll be legit insane. Yes, that is what it felt like. Like insanity was coming over me. Coming for me. Already had me. So this is what it feels like to lose your mind? I shook heavily, yet my body below slept on, unmoving. Let me be clear, this was not a dream. I was out of my body, and I could not get back in. I could not get back in. I flew to see the kids, laughing at cartoons, eating cereal. They didn't see me. I'm going to lose custody, I thought again. I'm going to lose everything. I'd risked them. How could I have risked them? What if they found me unable to awaken? I was going to pay a price for my awakening, and this was it. I pushed myself toward my body, feeling the darkness fight me, hold me back. Close the door. Keep it locked. No, Robin, you cannot be Robin again. You'll never be Robin again. I threw myself, at my body, again and again, fighting the darkness. I had nothing but my will. I banged against myself hard, again, hard, again, hard. Finally, after who knows how long, but way, way too long, I saw Robin waking up, and I got back in her. Relief and sweat mingled. Terror remained. The darkness was still in the room. I walked out to my kids, wobbly, uncertain, trembling. They did not notice, which I was glad about. I got myself something to eat, thinking it might help, ground me, something. The kids got ready for bed, and I tucked them in and went back to my room and insisted I would not sleep. It could not happen again. I might not get back in my body next time. I felt the darkness within my own fear. It had not left. It was with me. I called Terry and told her everything. I begged for her to help me. What had happened? She said it sounded like psychic attack, something I'd not heard much about. She looked up the symptoms, the telltale signs, and we agreed it fit. But who would be attacking me? As if in reply, I immediately got an email from an ex-boyfriend who had not been too pleased about our ending. He said he'd been to a haunted house flocked with vultures and meditated on us. He hoped I was having a good vacation, ha ha. Terry suggested I get some tiger eye, a stone reported to offer protection from psychic attack. Do we really believe in psychic attack? I asked her. It doesn't sound like something you have to believe in anymore, Robin, she argued. I thought about it. If you believed in the power of positive thought, of healing energies, then negative intent had to be real too. Shit. I kept Terry on the phone as long as I could and then faced the night alone. Tomorrow, I promised myself I'd look for a tiger eye stone and a healer. Lots of places in Sedona had healers and helpers on hand. I slept fitfully and I woke, but the terror was still within me. My guides offered only one word: initiation. Shit. I mean shit. The next morning, my body still trembled and my mind was scattered by fear. I found the New Age shop and got the biggest piece of tiger eye I could find. I also saw a book of healers, psychics, channelers, and others to choose from. I saw a picture of a guy named Raven, Native American, a healer. Could a raven go up against a dark crow? Because that is what it felt like was coming up against me. My own dark crow, come to life. Better odds than me trying. The shopkeeper called him. He asked to speak to me. He didn't wait for my story, instead blurted out, "Do you think someone's trying to kill you?" Oh, hell, are we in the deep end of the pool or what? Yes, I replied, though in truth the thought of the ex-boyfriend going that far had not occurred to me. I agree, Raven said. He's been after me all night, too. He knows I'm going to help. Even though, I'll be honest, I don't really know how. I'll be there in 45 minutes. That's as fast as I can get there. Will you wait? I swallowed hard, nodding, then found my voice to say yes. Where else was I going to go? Raven arrived and we talked things through, finally deciding on a ceremony with tobacco in each of our right hands, and the intent for the darkness to leave me and go into it. Then we'd release the tobacco into the river. Don't stop until it's over, Raven warned sternly. I understood. Our hands shook my arms so hard my entire body had to brace itself to hold on. For about 2 minutes, 2 very long minutes. And then it was done. I felt it when the darkness left. Traveling back to the hotel, I wondered if I would ever have the courage to travel in the shamanic realms again. After I picked up my kids from camp, the 3 of us headed over to the Church of the Angels, Sedona's Chapel of the Holy Cross. Why angels agree to be seen there and not other places, who knows, but it's a destination for those who believe. The timing was perfect. I still felt weak, and I would take any positive vibes I could get. It felt good to be there, but no angels, at least not for me. As we drove away, I asked the kids what they felt. My oldest liked it, but didn't feel much in particular. My youngest, only 5 and of such a pure spirit, said, "Mommy, I saw lots of angels, little angels around your head. They had spears." I immediately looked into the rearview mirror, startled. Were they attacking me? No, Mommy, they were protecting you. For the first time since leaving my body, my heart stopped racing. Gratitude filled me, and it was only then that I truly felt the angelic presence I had been seeking. I was no longer afraid to sleep. The story might have ended there, but it didn't. While I'm not at liberty to go into details, let me assure you, I faced the darkness head on, in person, and stood my ground in love. The whole story was corroborated by a team of Ecuadorian shamans who were kind enough to see the truth and repair the damage that had been done in us both. I did understand what it was all about. Again, you don't get to share light without being tested. You can't write dark without knowing it firsthand, without it attempting to capture your spirit. For me, the tale of good and evil would never, ever be a one-sided affair again. The shaman in me would never doubt darkness and its potential, a lesson that would serve me well. Scary as it was, I was glad for the initiation, and felt that somehow I'd earned my right to tell a story of hope and love. And so I told it. Enter your labyrinth at BeWhoYouAre.com.